Hey sister friends, it's Terry from Sisterhood of the Traveling Brush. Welcome. If you're new here, I appreciate you stopping by. We are now on episode 6 of our Furniture Painting 101 series, and today we are going to be discussing top coats and finishes like clear coats, polyurethanes, waxes, salves, and all of the above. I'm glad you're here. I hope you'll hit the subscribe button and you'll get a notification each week whenever our video goes live, and check out the rest in the series if you haven't seen it yet. And we'll be here next week with episode 7 on where and how to sell your furniture, including shipping and getting it there. Now to get on with the details for today. Paints that need top coats are like the chalk and clay based paints, the ones that have that chalky like finish, that not just because they're flat, but they actually have a finish that would absorb oil if you flicked it on it or something like that, that don't have the smooth finish, or where you can tell they have a binder or a top coat of some sort built in, kind of like wall paint, like latex paint that, you know, Sherwin-Williams paint or whatever. Those don't need a top coat because they already have something built in. Dixie and the all-in-one paints, all of those have an acrylic base or a base that has a binder in it that doesn't have to have a top coat, but they also still have the minerals in it, the whether it be clay or chalk or whatever other minerals in there that can absorb the extra top coats. So that's where we get to do all the beautiful decorative finishes using the top coats. So there's sort of a protective finish. Some products have built in already. And then there's the finish that makes it beautiful and aged and antiqued or blended, or all the other things that we can do. Change it from shiny to matte or matte to shiny, and all those other options. So that's the differences, and we're gonna talk about these all the same, and if there's something that would vary from one over another, I'll make sure and mention that. So the first thing we're gonna discuss is wax, and I'm gonna be reading, so now excuse the glare. We gotta do what we gotta do when we get to this age. Okay. There's more than one kind of wax, obviously, and we're going to go over these. But the main thing I want to discuss about the furniture wax is there is a petroleum-based and there's a water-based. As far as I know, Dixie is the only water-based one. If you know something else, let me know, and we'll both be educated on that. But for the most part, thing that I know is Dixie is water-based. And with that, it's the only wax that I know that you can put your wax on first, then let this dry, anywhere from a few hours to overnight or whatever, and then you can use your other top coats over it. But as a general rule, almost all of the waxes are actually oil or petroleum based, and they're going to act like a resist to anything else that you put over it, so they have to be the very last thing you do. So that's kind of important to remember, is the Dixie wax being water-based, you can put gator hide or satin top coat or whatever over it after it dries. But with like the DIY wax, that always has to be your last thing. Put everything else on first and wax last. So that's the two main kinds there, but I'm going to go over some more, and I do have to look back and forth to my notes. The Dixie wax is white. This is their clear. It's white. It goes on white and dries clear, and that's supposed to be to, help you see that you've put it everywhere and let you know that you've got it everywhere. And you would let this dry until it feels dry. I mean, that could be anywhere depending on the humidity in your area or whatever. That could be anywhere from an hour to overnight. I usually do stuff overnight. And then you can come back and buff it to as much sheen as you would like. DIY wax, this is my very favorite wax. This stuff goes on like butter. It's just I don't know, it's just so smooth, and it glides like melted butter, you know what I mean? It's so smooth, it glides on well. And what these waxes do is the sort of the porous content of the chalk paint absorbs this, and it can scare the heck out of you, especially with something like the DIY clay-based paint, because it's going to look all streaky, it's going to look dark in some areas are not, and this is like a panic attack waiting to happen the first time you use it, because that's just the way it does. And when it dries, then it's going to be absorbed evenly. It is going to still darken that color back to what it looked like when it was wet, but it is going to absorb in there, and it sometimes will take even 2 or 3 days to get completely settled in there to where it's smooth. But try not to panic. I panicked. Try not to panic, because it does get a smooth finish afterward. And somewhere between those two, I just tried last week, this is Jolie paint. This is their Topcoat clear, but it is a finishing wax. It goes on middle of the road between the two. For me, the Dixie Belle wax takes a whole lot of elbow grease and a whole lot more work to get it on. It's not as easily workable as the DIY wax. And in between the two, medium workability, is the Jolie finishing wax. But then you got the pro of being able to paint over that. I hate to even tell you this next part, but I'm going to, because that's what I do. I blab my mouth and tell everything. I went and got these upstairs this morning. These are the very first waxes I ever used on furniture pieces that I did. These next 3 containers are probably 15 years old, and I'm actually surprised that it still looks soft in there. This is, I bought it at Walmart in the automotive section, super hard shell paste wax. When I first read about it, it was Annie Sloan that came out back then. It was like, you have to put wax on after it. Well, I didn't know anything about it, so I went to the store and got wax, this kind of wax. And I'm going to keep that sponge out for a second. Same thing, that, and then this was a natural, and this one is a special dark. I got these at Lowe's or Walmart or somewhere. These are hard to use, y'all. I don't even know what else to tell you. When you start talking about using elbow grease, when you start putting something like this on a project, be prepared to work your shoulders into a pain-loving frenzy, because it hurts and it's a lot of work. And I even got out the buffer that goes on my drill to work like the car. I couldn't buff it down. I got myself into more work than I ever anticipated, and I probably saved $5 by buying this instead of this. I mean, it wasn't worth it. But if you ain't got no money and you got some of this in your house, it can be done. And you would just use it like the others. And I'm really ashamed to tell you this part. This came from the same area. I used shoe polish in the beginning with those waxes because I wanted to antique it. You can't see them, but the window, well, you can on, no, well, that's a different one. Anyways, in this building I'm in right now, this used to be my husband's man cave, now it's my studio. When we were finishing this and I wanted to put an aged look on the fluted things that went around our windows and all that, I used that car wax and this shoe polish. I've used this on furniture, I've used it on other faux things. It's hard to use, it's hard to control. It gets darker in some areas and lighter than others, and you have a heck of a time getting it right. But if you ain't got no money, and your husband has some of these, or you have some of these, or your daddy and your papa had some of these, and you got their shoe shine kit, you can do it. It is pretty highly pigmented, but just be prepared to have bursitis and tennis elbow when you're done, but it can be done. One other wax, and with this one, this is the Dixie Belle Clear Matte Spray Wax, easy peasy wax. If you can hear it, I don't know if you can hear that or not. With this, whoo, look at that. With this, you shake it until you don't hear it anymore. That's important. That's what mixes the ingredients in here to make sure you get a good solid wax finish. You shake it till you don't hear it anymore, spray it on the project, wipe it in, and it cures in 6 hours, and you have a cured piece. You're looking at, you know, leaving anywhere from overnight to, you know, several days for some of the waxes to completely dry. This one cures in 6 hours, which means you can, since it's a water-based, it's a Dixie Belle product, you'll be able to clear coat over this tomorrow, gator hide, whatever you want to do next, you'll be able to do after this. And this is really good for sort of sealing a piece if you're using a clay-based paint or a lot of minerals in your paint, you know, a very dry kind of paint. This is really good for easily sealing all of that to where you can then go back to it and put all your other types of embellishments and things over it. So this is a really good option, but it's light, it's not heavy. And then we're going to talk about colored waxes really quick, or probably not really quick, but next. This is Dixie Belle Grunge Gray, and that's going to put obviously gray. They come in black, gray, brown, white, and clear with Dixie Belle. I use a good bit of the brown. Again, this is water-based, and to me, this has almost like a thick pudding consistency rather than a wax consistency. And it's not as highly pigmented as some of the other brands. It's subtle, but here's a tip. This is an important tip. Clear before color. You always, say you know that you want a brown wax on there. Before you put your brown wax, you need to put your clear wax all over it. It doesn't have to dry. Just put the clear wax first to seal those pores. If not, you're going to turn everything brown that you don't want to turn brown. You don't know how many creaks and crevices and stuff are in your piece until you put the colored wax on there without having the clear wax under it. You could also, real quick, you could also top coat first. You could put like a satin top coat and then wax. And then your colored wax is going to glide really well, and you can concentrate it only in the areas that you want, and then you can wipe back the excess. But the biggest tip of all is, if you get too much, you just go back to your clear wax, put it on your rag, and you can erase the colored wax. It's so cool. That's so important. Anyway, with the colored waxes, you put it in the seams and the crevices, however you want it, all over in the details, whatever you want to do. And again, this one is water-based, the Dixie Belle one. You can come back over it with your gator hide or top coat after it dries. And then now we're going to talk about the DIY ones. This is some of their colored ones. Isn't that gorgeous? This is called Shipwrecked. This is so highly pigmented, and this is good for like a copper patina. Say you're wanting something to look coppery. It's going to stain your fingers. Use a glove whenever you're using these waxes. The DIY comes in black, dark, clear, and Shipwrecked, which is that teal color. This is another Shipwrecked in the larger size. And the dark is great for aging, and when you want it to be really stark black, you would go with the black. The white from the DIY or the Dixie Belle, that's almost, if you want that sort of, it's hot right now, that sort of bleached, pickled look. That's when you put your clear wax on first, or your clear coat, and then you come back, because I have put this straight on my piece and I was never able to get out how much white I got in there. And it was splotchy and it wasn't great looking, and I didn't have anybody to tell me to make sure and use the white or the top coat first. This is miraculous for the things that are popular right now, and just remember to put something under it so that you'll be able to erase it easier. Other types of waxes. This one is from Junkyard Goddess. I bought this one. I tried their milk paint, and theirs is a hemp wax. I'm going to open both of these real quick. Theirs is a hemp wax, and It's kind of hard. It almost reminds me of this kind of wax. So it takes a little more elbow grease to put it on, but they also have options with like glitter in it and things like that. So what I would probably do if it was important to me to use, this one is, it has essential oils in it, or you can put it, but it's solvent free, toxin free, and it's beeswax. That's why it's so hard, is this one is beeswax. But you can, you know, use the glitter one, make sure and put the clear one down first. One other thing I wanted to mention with the Dixie Belle and the DIY, you can create a custom wax. I've done this several times where, say you're working on a piece that's several shades of blue and maybe some purple in there or something, and you want to come back with, say, a navy blue in the details. You just take a couple of good tablespoons of your clear wax. Start with maybe a half a teaspoon of your desired paint color, any color in the rainbow. Stir that in, and then now you have a colored wax. And easy peasy to do. And the other one more thing I wanted to mention is the Gilding Waxes. DIY has one. Dixie Belle has one, and this is how the Dixie Belle ones used to come. Inside here is Golden Goodness. These are what you would come around the edges and over the details and just gilding. So the order of things is you would put on your clear wax or your clear top coat, put on your decorative wax, then come on at the very end with your gilding wax. And you don't put anything over this ever, because this is a finishing product. This is the oil base. It's going to create a resist if you try to put something over it, so you don't put a top coat over that. So that's all on the waxes. And next on our list are the clear coats. And of course you've got flat, satin, eggshell, middle of the road there, light sheen, and glossy as the main ones. And for the flat, I use the Dixie Belle Clearcoat Flat. And these come in 8 ounce, 16 ounce, and 32 ounce, and a gallon, but it's cheaper to buy 432s than a gallon. This is another one. I used to hear years ago a lot about this, and I bought some. This is the General Finishes Flat Out Flat, and it was good. And I actually poured it in a sealable container like this so that it would be easy to use my sponge in. That's a very good one. And Banana Peel by Junk Monkey is another good one that's matte at the end. And those are where you want it to still look like chalk paint. You don't want it, you know, to have any sheen at all. You want it, but you want to protect the finish. So that's what you would do with your flats. And after you get these flats on, you can then add your transfers or, you know, your embellishments or anything else that you want to do there. So that gives like no sheen at all, just a flat finish. Flat and matte, meaning the same exact thing. Then you have the satin or the eggshell middle of the road finish. That's the most popular for everything. That would be your Dixie Belle Clearcoat Satin or your DIY Big Top After Show. These I'm going to have to backtrack in just a second. These you are best applied with a synthetic brush. And I have, well, about 3, and it's usually a mini. This is just what I grabbed. But a synthetic bristle brush is going to leave less brush strokes with your top coat. So your options for that would be have a synthetic brush, write on it, top coat brush, so that you always use the same one, but clean it in between every time. But I neglected to discuss how application of the wax. I like to use wax brushes most of all. These are the Paint Pixie wax brushes. I've used these for years and years, my very favorite. I don't wash my wax brush ever, and it's still soft as everything. some people, if you do decide you're gonna wash your wax brushes, make sure you're using a grease destroying cleaner of some sort, like the Clean as a Whistle by Dixie Belle, or maybe Scrubby Soap Mite would do it, or maybe Dawn dishwashing liquid, or just do like me and I never wash them. I have probably 4 now of these brushes because I use, I was trying to get one out to show you. This one says white wax on it. I have one that I keep for white wax, one that I use for clear wax. This one says clear wax as well, so apparently I have 2 that say clear wax. This one says dark and colored waxes, and because you can't get dark on this and then go back to your clear without messing something up. And I personally just have an old scrapbooking bag. This is my wax brush bag, my waxing bag, and I just keep all of these together and separate from other stuff. We also have, this is the, what's it called, La Petite natural bristle brush by Dixie Belle. This one's good for getting in crevices and in corners and inside drawers and all that. Also natural bristle, and I use these, the French tip and this flat, both for colored waxes when I'm trying to get them in crevices and details and things. So those always stay in there. They're wax brushes. You also, when I'm applying, especially when I'm applying colored wax, I just use a cut up t-shirt. You know, I just cut these up as they go and just keep a big old thing of them. So I use those for that. You can also apply with an applicator pad, and I use chip brushes a lot of times for the dark colors, because I wouldn't want to ruin these 2 if I'm getting in details by using it with a dark color. So I'll use a chip brush to scrub that into the details. And I keep a couple of artist brushes that I've done the same thing with. These things get hard and yucky, but they're reusable for dark wax again. And then at the end for the buffing, I buff with the t-shirt rag. Sometimes if I really want a sheen, I'll come back with this finishing pad. But also, and there's like 3 sizes of these now. This is my favorite one. It's called the Buffy. And I use this one for buffing the waxes, sort of like we used to do the shoe shine thing. And that's a really good brush for that. And then the finishing pad for buffing at the end. Glossy. I don't know, I have, this is one that, a high gloss top coat. This one I use for like countertops, because it's a really strong one. This one comes from Johnny Countertop People. But I use, I seldom do a glossy because I'm just not a fan of that look. But when I do, there's the Dixie Belle Clearcoat gloss, or if I'm needing it really hard and I'm redoing a laminate countertop or something like that, I'll use the Johnny one. So that's your high gloss. Then there are a few that I'm going to go over, which I call specialties, and that's the DIY Liquid Patina, and this comes in clear, and then a dark one called Dark and Decrepit. And then their golden ticket is also considered a liquid patina. And I believe the old and gray barnwood is sort of like a liquid patina. However, I do want to stop on this one. I live in Louisiana, and it's very humid here. Year round, it's very humid here. These don't dry well for me. 2 weeks later, they can sometimes still be tacky and just never, 3 months later they can still be tacky and never dried. I don't know why, but a lot of people use these for decoupage mediums to get the aged finish or the gold finish or whatever. But if you live in an area with high humidity, I'm just letting you know ahead of time that you may have an issue. The rest of the country doesn't have an issue with that. And one more thing, when I'm going to have the golden ticket out here whenever I talk about metallics or mention it again, but this is opaque. When you put the golden ticket on, you can't see through it. And the old and gray, you can see the wood grain through it, and that's good for, you know, making a barn wood look. But they have the crystal clear chandelier, dark and decrepit, and the golden ticket, and the pennies from heaven, the copper one, is also opaque. Gator hide, that's the Dixie Belle, water resistant, tough as nails, what you would use on bathroom or kitchen cabinets, the tops of tables, things that are going to get a lot of use, things banged around on them, a lot of chance of moisture and cups sitting on them. Gator hide is the toughest of the top coats. That's Dixie Belle's. It has a sort of a middle of the road sheen, the sort of a satin, and you can buff that to a sheen later with the finishing pad. Then there's Glazes, and that's like the Dixie Belle pearlescent glaze, and I do have one here somewhere. The Glazes come in like a 4 ounce and an 8 ounce, and the same thing would be like with the metallics. The Dixie Belle Moonshine Metallics, you can see through unless you apply enough coats to where you can get it to be opaque. Say you would use a base coat of a color that matches. One coat's going to give you a little bit of like a pearlescent glaze. 2 coats, it's going to get a little more opaque. 3 coats, and you've got a solid metallic finish. And you do not have to use any other top coat after that. Oil based, these are difficult to use. I don't really recommend them, but you know, I would be remiss if I didn't mention them here. But that's like shellac, varnish, oil-based polyurethane. All those must be used in a well-ventilated area. One more thing, you can use the sprays, and I sometimes do these to seal the paint, especially like a clay-based paint that can be reactivated. You can lightly mist to seal that between coats if you don't want to blend or you don't want to wet distress or pull any of it up. And this one is a satin. This one's low odor, and this one says satin. Somewhere I had a matte. This may be, oh, it does say matte on the lid. Those do have their time and place and usefulness. I wouldn't use that to be the finish over my whole piece, but it sure is a great tool to have for in between. Metallics, Junk Monkey also has one. This is a champagne color, one-step metallic paint and sealer. Big shiny dreams for your furniture. This one is, you know, has a little bit of champagne color built in on that one. The next thing would be hemp oil, and I do have one out here, and this is fabulous. I want to say that with, I'm going to back up one more second first. With the gator hide, for one, it doesn't play well with transfers. So if you're going to use a transfer, make sure and put a satin top coat, or the Dixie Belle Clearcoat satin on it first, and then the gator hide, because sometimes it'll bubble up or pull it up with the gator hide. So you can, and anytime personally, this is another little tip, that I want the gator hide coverage, when I finish painting, I put a coat of the Clearcoat satin on there before my gator hide, because it absorbs in well and it doesn't leave any kind of streaky finish as long as you're using 2 to 3 very thin coats. If you put it on there too thick, it's gonna, it can look yellow through there because of the thickness of what you left. So you want just really thin coats of that. But put a coat of the satin and then put your gator hide, and then you can put another coat of gator hide or whatever. And the same thing with the transfers. Put the satin top coat first and then put the gator hide over it. And with the gator hide, another tip, you can use the synthetic brush like we talked about with the other polys. But it's also very good, this is called a gator hide sponge. Very good to use the gator hide sponge. It has very, very small pores in there. And you can use a car wash sponge, you know, the great big ones, and just cut it into halves or quarters. And for an even smoother finish, you can put like a piece of a stocking or an old knee-high or whatever over this to make the holes even smaller. And you just glide from one end to the other on your piece, and then you have no chance of brush strokes at all. But one more thing I wanted to finish, to add, is if you want that to have a finish where fingerprints don't really show, or maybe there's a little texture to it, or it looks a little heavier, you can dip this in your gator hide, we're going to pretend, and then you tap it. You tap it all over, and it looks almost like, if you glance at it in the light afterwards, it looks almost like, you know, the hammered copper type of finish on there. It's not going to give you the smooth finish as if you were pulling it across, but a little bit of a textured finish, not so much that you feel, but that, you know, prevents it from letting smudges and fingerprints and stuff show so much. When it comes to dark colors, like the blacks, Dixie Belle Caviar, whichever of the real, even in the navy or the really dark colors, it's very hard to get a top coat on there and not have streaks show. I mean, just to be honest, it's maybe very hard is a little bit too harsh, but there is a little bit of an issue with that. And this, when you use the hemp oil, it doesn't leave anything like that at all. And you would just use an applicator pad, squirt some on your applicator pad, or apply this directly on your piece, and then rub it in, and just put it all over. And this is going to dry to a hard, food safe. So if you're doing a baby crib, if you're doing a cutting board, or a noodle board, or a tray, something that's going to come into contact with food surfaces, the Howdy Doody hemp oil is great for that. And it sinks into the finish. It's absorbed into the finish with the into the chalk or clay or whatever's there, and becomes part of it, and gets rock hard, and you never have to ever do it again. So that's a really good one there. Does not streak, great for dark, needs to penetrate. So you can't put it, because it needs to penetrate in order to create that hard finish. You can't put it on after gator hide or after satin top coat. It's not going to do you any good to put it on top of latex paint or anything like that. So it does need to penetrate. You don't use that over, you could use that over Voodoo Gel Stain, but you would never use that over No Pain Gel Stain, which is oil based, because it needs to absorb, and the No Pain Gel Stain is already sitting on top of that surface and it can't absorb. Then we have salves and butters. This is the Big Mama's butter. I very seldom use this as a top coat, but it can be used, and you would just use it in a similar fashion to wax, but it would then be oil based. And I use this more inside drawers to help them glide, and to nourish the sides of drawers and stuff, so that, the wood's not thirsty anymore. But it can be used as a top coat as well, very similar to how you use wax. Usable but not recommended, the shoe polish and the furniture polish. And your tools were synthetic brushes for your clear coats, because it's less likely, and you don't want to work it in, and especially not after, if you're going all the way across a piece, you don't want to work it back and forth and work it to death, because the top coats are going to start to dry pretty fast. And once you've started gumming that up with your brush, you can't come back from it. Then you got to let it dry and sand it off. So you want to get it on there. If it takes a little to get more right here, pull on through. Get that start to finish with your, sort of horizontal brush from beginning to end. And then most of these are self-leveling to where you're not going to have the brush strokes on there afterward. With your waxes, get yourself a wax brush. If you don't have one yet, you can use a rag and buff with the rag and all of those things. But I definitely, 99% of the time, I'm using my wax brushes. They make it go on easy. It's easy to scrub it into the crevices and the paint lines and things that are in there, and to get your wax everywhere you need it to go. And that's it. We're at the end. We're at the end. Hey. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed that episode, and make sure and check out the others if you haven't watched them yet, or be here next Thursday for episode 7. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and let me know in the comments below where you're watching from. Thanks. Bye.